Well, this evening we have a panel of three brethren from the United Kingdom, and the United Kingdom. And you have a presiding brother from Australia. So in other language they call this a bloodless coup d'etat. The aliens have taken over. All that we need now is for Brother Jim Sullivan to come forward and sign a document of surrender. That's all that's needed, and it will be complete. The transition is complete. 1776, all that we can forget. Well, we look forward very much to our panel this evening, Brother Darren Guy, Brother Philip Lawrence, and Brother Tim Morgan. And they're going to speak to us on a very interesting, I think, very helpful theme. And I'm sure it's somewhat a difficult one in many respects. Ecclesial change, challenges, and opportunities. So we have much pleasure now in listening to the three brethren on this topic.
Thank you, Ron. Evening, everyone. So Ron provocatively said over dinner to me, so are you going to tell us the answer to ecclesial problems then? To which I think, speaking for all three of us, no. We have no intention of trying to give you any answers or presuming that we have any answers for you at all. I think, though, collectively we would pose you a question, which is, are you standing up to the questions that your ecclesia are facing? Are you prepared to accept that the world is changing around you and you need to think about how effective you are in your ecclesia and your ecclesia is in the world? And we want to do that this evening by looking at it from three different angles. I'll be kicking off by talking about something called the big conversation, which happened in the UK a few years ago. Tim's going to be talking about resurrection of his ecclesia in certain circumstances. And there's a wonderful opportunity and challenge in the UK at the moment with a large immigration of particularly Iranians, which our brotherhood is rising to the challenge of and seeing as a huge opportunity, which Darren will take us through as well. So, the big conversation. It was back in 2012, 13, 14 that a group of us who used to go to a Bible school used to kind of sit in the evening drinking our last cup of green tea before we went to bed for the night. With our little fingers in the air. Kind of pondering the state of our community with the sense of it's not getting any easier. In fact, we see some ecclesias closing. We see young people joining but then leaving. We see numbers declining. And we thought, you know what, why is it just us talking about it? It isn't just us talking about it, but surely we need to have a much bigger conversation with people to really stand up and look long and hard in the mirror and say, what is happening to our community? And if the Lord remains away, what will we be like in a few years' time? And is there anything that we should be doing differently in order to address the problems that we face today? And that was the outset of invitations to all 250 UK ecclesias to come to Birmingham in 2015 and have a big conversation. And over 120 ecclesias turned up. We had 430 plus representatives. And I guess from the subject matter, it was those people who were interested in change and who felt the same that turned up. Maybe those that thought, we don't need to do anything differently, decided that they didn't need to come. So there probably was a bias in the room when we had this conversation. One brother who actually was in charge of collecting all the data for the ALS diary had done quite a lot of analysis. A number of people in the UK had religiously gone through the intelligence of the Christadelphian magazine for the last 100 years or so and kept a running record of deaths, baptisms, marriages, etc., etc. So we had various sources of data in the UK as to what was happening with our community. And Brother John had kind of done this analysis, and he put his first slide up And he said, look, brothers and sisters, we all know that ecclesias are closing and that our numbers are declining. And if we don't do something about it, then in the next 30 years, by 2045, our numbers are going to decline. That's quite a provocative slide, isn't it? That's quite arresting. But then he said, gotcha. That's what's happened since 1985. So if you look back in the last 30 years at the UK, the numbers of UK Christadelphians have declined from over 12,000 to just over 8,000. Now, we are only looking at the UK here. I don't know what the US picture is like. I know what the African picture is like. This is extraordinary, it is encouraging, it is wonderful that people are responding each day to the gospel message. And there are more Christadelphians in Africa than there are in the UK. There's probably more Christadelphians in Mozambique than there are in the UK. So admittedly, this is only one country, and it's a Western country, and it's a materialistic country, but that is what is happening to our community. So Brother John then said, look, our population is actually going up, and yet we're going down. You might feel that's okay because your local Church of England or Catholic Church is probably having a similar experience. I mean, my uncle goes to the Church of England. He's 82 and he's the only one left on the organ rota, and by organ they have a proper organ in that church. Yeah. It was really interesting. We were there a couple of weeks ago because we went down to visit him, and we like to go and listen to his service in the hope that when he comes to stay with us, he'll come to our service. Wonderful. You go in there, the bells are chiming. We had a look through the back room, and there they were, 8 people pulling these bell ropes all in time, and it was absolutely stunning. I didn't realise till later that they all clear off out the back door as soon as they finished and go down the pub. Bell ringing is a hobby. The church, they get the surrounding churches to come to that service because there aren't enough people and there aren't enough vicars and enough clergy to keep all the churches of the Churches of England open. So what's happening to the Christadelphians is no worse than what's happening to other churches around us. Well, yes, but no. I don't know where you live, but in Nottingham there are some very successful churches. And I don't necessarily mean those that we would call Pentecostal. I mean those that are quite seriously Bible-based and have a similar pattern of worship as we do are growing and are appealing to students. And they have a huge range of ministry going on in the city, and it is very impressive. There is still a receptive audience out there for the gospel message. It's just that somehow in my church we've been unable to tap into it for whatever reason. And so these questions are staring us in the face in the UK, in Nottingham. John then put another slide up which said, look, let's be honest, looking around the room, I mean, Butcher's a lot younger than he looks, but the rest of you, the demographic is not that encouraging, is it? A quarter of our community in the UK is over 75, a third is under 50, and the balance is between 50 and 75. So my 2 kids, who were both baptised, what will ecclesial life be like for them? Will they expect to see the ecclesial dwindling in size? Will that then mean that the hall is sold? Will that then mean that they move into a house group? Or will it mean that they kind of merge with the local ecclesias? At what point do we get to the South Africa moment in time where the South Africa ecclesias kind of got together and said, we're now less than 400, what are we going to do about it? And they had a big concerted effort. The 2010 project, I think, this is back in the early 2000s, and had a concerted effort over a number of years to try and do things differently. And some of you have been over to South Africa to support them in their projects in the townships. So Brother John then said, look, if we carry on doing what we do, we're going to get the same outcome. Obviously, everything is in the hands of the Lord God. That's a precursor for everything, isn't it? And he is in control, and we see him working in our community, and there is some good news which the other 2 will share later on. But if we don't do anything, if we don't think about it and front up to reality, what is it going to be like for our children and our grandchildren? So, everybody split up into groups, all these over 430 people. We all went into sessions of discussion, and then we had facilitators, and the facilitators summarised, and they came back and we fed back. And we had a meeting afterwards to kind of have a look at all the material. And I think these are the top 3 points that came out of the day. We all recognise we want some more innovative preaching. We need to think carefully about how we do it. Expecting people now to come through our doors at 6 o'clock on a Sunday evening and sit through a Bible-based lecture is not working. How do we build those bridges with people to gain their trust, as I spoke about this morning, in order that we can then open up our hearts and our minds and our Bibles? Because we're not living in the 19th century where people are interested in all the different views and they come with the knowledge themselves and they come ready to argue and debate and to listen. That's not to say that people do not have a huge range of issues and uncertainties and fears and they don't know what the answer is. And we are sitting here with this pearl of great price on our laps. But we need to find a different way of reaching out to people so we can spread that message. Secondly, people in the room thought, we've tried some of this before, but it's so demoralising. Time and time again, we get the answer back from the ABs that says, we don't do it like that. We've always done it like this. And you know how defeating that is for a young person who's got a bright idea and doesn't feel listened to? They're only going to hang around for so long. So there was a real feeling of constraint in the room, and not just constraint, but fear. Fear that actually as soon as you have an idea, which might be an off-the-wall idea, it might not be fully formed through, but your motives are pure because you want to share the gospel, someone puts you right back in your box, or judges you, or actually kind of says you're watering down the gospel. No, I'm not. I'm just trying to have a preliminary conversation with someone before I can open up to them the promises to Abraham. Please don't accuse me of watering down the gospel. So there's a real fear in the room as well, of not just of implementing change, but of having some of these conversations. So what we've been able to do during the course of the day is to capture some of the good things that were working as well. Some ecclesias were saying, well, no, this is working. We've tried that. That didn't work, but this is actually really quite interesting. And we managed to pull together a pack of information for people. And within that pack of information, which we sent out, was again those statistics, that data, so that you could go back to your ecclesia and say, hey, look at this graph. In fact, there were some other interesting statistics in there as well. And I should have said the fourth point was apathy. The fourth point in the room was, we don't sense that people mind. They're not zealous enough. They come and they participate and they go. They're not thinking hard enough about the future of our community if the Lord remains away. Some of the other interesting data was that in the last 15 years, of all the baptisms in the UK, a quarter of them had come from just 16 ecclesias. So 16 ecclesias were doing something which was really quite effective. The rest of us were wholly ineffective. A third of ecclesias in the last 15 years hadn't baptised anybody at all. So when you look in the mirror and you're prepared to confront the brutal facts, you're paused to think about, are we going about our service of the Lord Jesus Christ in the most effective way? And I hope if one thing's coming through from our talks today, weren't Peter and Paul innovators? Didn't they take risks? Didn't they break down boundaries? Didn't he make himself a Jew to the Jews and a Gentile to the Gentiles? What are we doing to address the audience of today? Some of the good ideas that people had were, well, we've decided to open a coffee shop in our church. You know, we've got an ante-room. We're right on the main street. We're going to try and man it in the week and get people to come in. And they'll know that it's a coffee shop in a church, and we'll have literature there, and we can sit down and talk to them and see whether we can engage them in conversation. Kate's idea was, well, I'm an artist. I'm going to run a Get to Know God Through Art course. Now, admittedly, that's not a 45-minute Bible lecture on the promises to Abraham, But if you are quite interested in art and you have got questions about God and you want a non-confrontational way of exploring that, then I would suggest coming in and sitting around a table and talking to people and doing some artwork is a great introduction to the Christadelphians. Others said, we need to get down to the market and have a market stall. Yeah, we'll give away free Bibles. One ecclesia went through an audit of their skills. They said, well, what can we do? What are we good at? What do we do in our professional lives? And they kind of looked at all their skills in the ecclesia and they said, you know what, we're quite a caring bunch. Why don't we partner with a charity and allow them to use our facilities in our hall, and they can run their functions here and we can partner them, and people in the community can get to know us at the same time, as well as we can go and help them in their charity work. There's a new Christadelphian charity just sprung up called Christadelphian Outreach Group. It's the touch to preach method of not just going over to Africa to find people who are poor, but looking on our own doorstep, those that are sleeping in doorways, issuing sleeping bags, going to support people who are living on the breadline in the UK. One ecclesia said, well, we're good, and we're going to open a community choir because we've got a whole range of musical skills, and we're going to leaflet the area and say, do you want to join a community choir? Come in on a Monday evening and let's sing, and let's put on a performance, and let's build a relationship. How do you use your hall? It's our biggest asset. Did the community even know it's there? Do you ever give them a reason to come inside? So we issued this pack. We suggested to people how they might initiate that conversation in the ecclesia. We gave them a spiritual health check to run through. Have you ever asked your ecclesia these questions? Do all our members benefit from our ecclesia? Which groups benefit the most and which ones the least? What does our ecclesia spend most of its time? How engaging, helpful and applicable are our exhortations? Who benefits from our public addresses? Do our communal prayers bring us closer to God? How would you describe our communal praise? Do you feel more uplifted when you leave than when you arrived? Challenging questions which stimulate a debate, which opens up the issue for the sharing of ideas and confronting what is quite a serious issue for us of how do you allow the gospel to shine and spiritual lives to be led in a dark world. Tim, tell us about resurrection.
Before I carry on, can I just ask, does anybody have any close family ties with Ashton-under-Lyne Ecclesia in the UK? So, that's okay, Owen, I can deal with that. And I don't believe you, Jim, for a moment. So, right, good. I can tell you like it really happened then. I haven't got to be too careful. Opportunities come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And actually, before the big conversation was launched and held in the UK, Ashton-under-Lyne Ecclesia ran out of time and it closed. And I just want to tell you the story of that ecclesia because now it's back open again. Just to lay the scene, you can see the red dot on the map. That is Manchester, and at the moment we host 7 ecclesias of different varieties, different flavours and different sizes. That's Manchester for you. So what I've done is the green dots are ecclesias which are open, and you can see the numbers that we've got. So we range from 8 at Oldham through to 95 at Sale. You can see that in all we have about 300 Christadelphians who are meeting regularly in 7 ecclesial halls. Ashton is the red dot, and as I said, that was an ecclesia which stopped meeting in 2002, and the yellow dots are ecclesias which have stopped meeting altogether and have disappeared off the map. I guess 50 years ago, there were probably twice as many Christadelphians in Manchester, but it's as Phil has said, certainly the ecclesias as on their individual levels have suffered as we have in the UK all over. Of course, you can look at a city from a slightly different perspective, and this is Manchester from a posh through to rough perspective. I don't know if this happens in the US, I guess it does. But usually in the UK, the south of the city is where the posh guys go. Sorry, am I standing in your way? So the south is where the posh guys go, and then you get the rough ones up in the north and the common ones on the east. Ashton-under-Lyne is where the commoners met and still meet, to be fair. But yeah, it's a whole host of different ecclesias of different sizes trying to progress the gospel and preach it in their different areas. And the areas definitely have different needs. And so we're trying to respond to those needs as best we can. So Ashton Ecclesia was a very old ecclesia. It was established in 1888, or at least that's the first reference I could find to it in the Christadelphian. So 6 members started meeting there. It peaked membership around 90, and as I said, closed in 2001. But basically, the ecclesia got very old, and there were about 10 of them left, and they all decided they'd had enough, and they retired to different areas in the UK. Some went and lived close to family, some went and lived in sort of the places where they'd holidayed for years, and the ecclesia just failed because the members had got worn out. I have very fond memories of the original ecclesia. It was one of the first places I ever gave a Bible class. They were quite liberal, I must admit. So I gave them a Bible class paper on angels. And I'll never forget, after that paper, one of the brethren came up to me and he said, "So, brother, you believe in angels then?" I left there thinking, wow. And they were definitely on the liberal side. But as I said, we have all sorts of flavours of Christadelphia in Manchester, as I guess you do here too. Here are a couple of photos from the archive. So if you Google Ashton Christadelphians, this is the photo of an ecclesial outing. I don't know when it was, but as you can tell, it was some time ago. This is one of the streets that Ashton held meetings on. So they had a variety of different halls in their history. And you can see it is really very working class. So it tended to be mining and mills. The people were definitely sort of from an industrial background. And that was the hall which was left and, well, became quite overgrown, as you can see. That's actually pretty much the condition we inherited it in. Because what happened was that before the asset was sold, a number of brethren from surrounding ecclesias decided that it might just be worth walking up the road that the ecclesial hall was on and canvassing the opinion of the inhabitants of the road. So they knocked on the doors and they said, "We're Christadelphians. We have the meeting hall down the road. The meeting has come to an end. The people have moved away. We're likely to sell the asset unless you can think of anything that we might be able to do for you before we close and sell." Now, of course, you've got to be really careful. You ask that sort of question, you could get all sorts of things. We could have been the new Christadelphian dancing hall. Fortunately, that didn't happen. And actually, consistently, the feedback that we got was the young people around here have absolutely nothing to do. And so they're becoming quite problematic. We would love to have a youth group in the local area for the kids to go to. Now that was quite interesting for us because actually the 2 biggest ecclesias in Manchester, Old Trafford and Sale, both have a history of doing a lot of work with young people in their local areas. So a lot of those 2 ecclesias are made up of people who have come in from the surrounding area because they originally went to youth group, then fed into Sunday school, and then became baptised and are members. So we had some experience, and some of the people who were involved in this project had been involved in that from very early on. And that's what we did then. So we opened, and I say we, I must admit that the Morgan family wasn't involved at this point, but the surrounding ecclesias clubbed together and reopened the youth club rather than selling the hall and taking the resources and distributing them to charities like the other day. And that youth club ran for 8 or 9 years without an ecclesia actually meeting in the hall. To be fair, the surrounding meetings had quite a lot of their own projects going on. We couldn't really resource an ecclesia there, and we weren't sure there was a need for an ecclesia there, because everybody was going, we were already going to other meetings around. However, the project that brought different members of different ecclesias together was to resource this youth group. And in the end, we were running 2, one for under 10s, I think it was, and one for over 10s. And those ran consistently until we hit a really big problem. And the problem caused us to have to reopen the ecclesia, which was very frustrating and problematic. And the problem was this, that one of the boys who had walked in to the Ashton meeting room, to the first youth group we held, put in his name for baptism. He had no background, Christadelphia at all. His only contact with any Christadelphian was the youth group. He'd never been to another ecclesia, never been to a youth weekend, never been to anything, but he was convinced he wanted to be baptised. And so the challenge was, what do we do? Do we baptise him and give him a bus ticket and say the Stockport is 10 miles that way? Or do we actually look seriously at reopening the ecclesia to accept him and to build something around him? And that's what happened. It started quite slow, so that a few of us from different ecclesias decided that we would move into that area and start populating that ecclesia. Actually, quite a few of the youngsters here are not from Christadelphian homes. They are members of the youth group at the time. The baptism, we have a pond too. This was possibly the fastest baptism in the UK, because the boy that wanted, the young man who wanted to be baptised, was quite nervous of Christadelphia. He knew there were other Christadelphians around, he hadn't met them, and he wasn't really sure that the first time he was going to meet them, he should just be in a pair of swimming trunks, ready to be baptised. So he said, no, I want to be baptised outdoors. And so we found a small piece of water where this might happen. This is actually a reservoir, so the water board in the UK were a little bit nervous about us putting somebody under the water when this is drinking water. They kept saying, you can't swim in it. So we're not swimming in it, we're announcing a new life in it, we're saving life in it. In the end, the compromise was that one Sunday morning, fairly early, before the water board populated their office, we went to a feeder pool, so not into the reservoir, but actually this is mountain water coming down off the hills, and this is a pond, and as I said, one of the fastest baptisms I've ever been involved in, because it was cold. Very interesting, very enlightening actually, when somebody comes up from the water screaming. We hope it was joy, and he still comes, but it was really rapid, and you can see. But what a joyful thing, and what a great witness, because there we were, watching, but actually not all of those are people from surrounding Christadelphia meetings. Some of those were walking their dogs, thinking, what on earth is going on here? But what went on there was the first of 8 baptisms which have happened at this ecclesia since we reopened it in 2012. I would say only 3 of those baptisms have been of people who are Christadelphian anyway. So 2 daughters of Brother Steve East and Sister Bethan. Our other baptisms have been people who have either come in because of their national history, so we have some Iranians, and I won't touch on those, Darren's going to pick up that strand, but also we've had the lad who announced he wanted to be baptised, who restarted the ecclesia. We also had an 85-year-old resident. She started coming to the meetings because she was quite lonely. She used to bring her husband. She took our recording brother to one side quite early in the piece and said, Lionel, you're not going to baptise me, I am too old, but I'm going to keep coming. Lionel said, you keep coming. About 2 years later, she got Lionel in the corner and said, Lionel, you better get me in that bath while you can. She's now in our care home in Southport, so it's a great story. And we've been successful at getting people in to the hall. You can see we've also been successful at some light modifications. So it is an old hall, and we've certainly had to throw some money at it to sort of keep it going. The older ecclesia kind of thought that it was going to get knocked down and houses would get built on it. So we've had to pick up a few projects and carry on. As I said, I'm going to leave Iranians for Darren, but you can see we've got a group here of Iranians who meet with us regularly. And you can see we had all sorts of other people in from other ecclesias when they're in the locale. So now we've got 30 members, and it's a great story, and it's really refreshing to be part of it. To be fair, I've been going to another ecclesia in Manchester for 20 years. I was a little bit battered, bruised and worn down, and this has rejuvenated me, which has been a great thing to be part of. In terms of the project now then, we're pretty lively, so we still have our very core, the youth clubs. They wax and wane. At the moment we're just running one, but from time to time we'll get an influx, and now and again we will relaunch, and it's a great source of interest and a link with the community. We have table tennis and pool for the over 60s. We have a Bible reading group. We regularly have meals and quizzes. And it's amazing how many people we get in. So half of the people, and notice the carpet by the way, that was one of the things that the old ecclesia left for us. We've only just got rid of it. One of the sisters said, we can't get rid of it, it's been here for as long as I can remember. I said, I will lay it in your hall stairs and landing system. We now have a new carpet and she doesn't have that carpet in her hands. But yeah, 50% of those people have nothing to do with the Christadelphian family. They're coming in off the street, and one of the links there is because they appreciate the fact that their youngsters have somewhere to go, and we've been consistently there. Now, I don't know what the front of your ecclesial hall looks like. I guess it may be full of cars. Ours was too small for cars, but this has been a really good success. So we decided that we would rip up the patio, the concrete, and plant a vegetable garden. It's amazing, people stop all the time. You can hardly get any work done in this vegetable garden. To start with, they were stopping saying, you do realise that all these vegetables are going to be stolen, don't you? This is Ashton and the line. But now actually, it's not that way. We've given this farm vegetable to one of the residents. He hasn't managed to do anything with it yet. But now they stop and say, good on you, well done, this is great, it makes the street look better. And to date, we have had no onions through the letterbox, and nothing has disappeared. Well, as I said, we keep going with our whole revelations. Sorry, that's an old English greeting. Yeah, he's half Maori, Brother East. We caught him at about. We had single services as well. So Easter, Christmas, there are different attitudes, of course, in the brotherhood to those sorts of things. But to us, it's a reason to invite people in and tell them what we believe, and that's how we approach it. Okay, well, a couple of challenges, and I'm going to hand over to Darren. One of the great opportunities has been that we have very little inertia. So we haven't got ecclesial traditions. We don't have to be too mindful that this has always been done this way, because of course we're only a couple of years old, and all of the members have come in from a whole host of ecclesias where things were done in different ways. So actually, when challenges have arisen, we've got together and said, well, how are we going to tackle this, mindful of the background of this ecclesia? The ecclesia being the fact that we're trying to continue our links with the local community. You can see, I suspect that is making somebody a little bit nervous, the word church. A lot of the ecclesias around us would not have that word on their notice board. For us, we have a range of opinions within the ecclesia, but the consensus was, well, let's call it something that people will recognise, so they'll know that we're not a meeting of some club, that actually they'll understand generally, basically, what is going on within the four walls. You can see, of course, as well that we are emphasising the fact that this is a youth club for them, even if it is an ecclesia for us at the same time. So that was certainly something which we debated at great length, and I've had some feedback from surrounding ecclesias where I go speaking there to say, well, you're not too keen on it. But ultimately, we have to make the decision for our ecclesia and what we're trying to do with the local community. In terms of flavour, as I said, there are all sorts of flavours of Christadelphia, aren't there? But my flavour is my dad's flavour. I would say pretty middle of the road. Some of the decisions we've made, I'm not absolutely 100% comfortable with. But we're a group of brothers and sisters, and we're trying to find a way forward with the opportunities that God has given us. And we all try to approach it in that manner. We have a flexible format. I guess one of the things that really drove this was if we are bringing in young people from a non-Christadelphian background, how are they going to react to being sat in rows of chairs, looking at the back of somebody's head, potentially with a big hat in front of them? So we have continued at the moment to have a circular format, and that works. We're almost at the maximum that we can house now in terms of the size of the hall, but we're continuing with it as best we can. Head coverings. Now, I'm not going to get controversial, don't worry. How do you explain, though, to somebody with a completely non-Christadelphian background that they're going to have to put a head covering on for all of their services? Actually, we had some people from Christadelphian backgrounds who really wanted to have that conversation. Ultimately, the ecclesia, when we discussed it as a whole, we agreed that it was wise to continue with head coverings for the breaking of bread so that ecclesias around us would feel comfortable and join with us. The last thing we wanted to be was a pocket of a particular flavour in Manchester. And that's how we continue. Some people are not really very happy about it, but they are comfortable with it because it's a decision that the ecclesia has taken. Music's a good one. We have one old organ and one old organist who can play about half the hymns. We have 2 different hymn books. So the young people, when they started joining the youth group, they were singing from Praise the Lord. Do you have Praise the Lord over here? Okay. So Praise the Lord would be used in some ecclesias in the UK. In others, it would be put on a bonfire out of the back and set alight. We use both of them, and we use that mindful of the group of people that we are serving. From time to time the organ breaks down, or we've had vandalism where suddenly we turned up and the youth group had modified the organ by taking all the valves out of it and all the fuses. So now and again we've had to resort to other instruments, but generally it is the Christadelphian hymn book and Praise the Lord. We really are trying to focus on the youngsters to make sure that they are comfortable. There are pockets in the UK where the youngsters are disappearing and starting to meet on their own terms in house groups. That is the very last thing that we want to happen in Ashton. We need them. They are our lifeblood as long as the Lord Jesus stays away. And so we're very mindful of making sure that they feel comfortable and engaged, so they're part of the decisions that we make as an ecclesia. I think that's it. Thank you for not shooting me down. No tomatoes or eggs, which is great. I'll now hand over to Darren. You can throw as many things as you want at him. Feel free.
This time last year, Karen and I were on our way home from Australia into Bible school over there. And we decided after probably about 3 years of consideration that we would change ecclesias for a fresh challenge. And we decided to join Bradford because we always found them very friendly and also very close to our home as well. About 5 miles, if that. What we didn't know was, just before we decided we wanted to join them, that the ecclesia had a meeting a month or 2 before, considering whether or not they should close. Because this time last year they had 18 members. 3 of whom were incapacitated and never able to get to the hall, either with dementia or things like that. We've also got issues with learning difficulties with 1 or 2 members, and 1 or 2 members also living a long way away from the ecclesia, but they refuse to join another ecclesia because they love Bradford so much. And of the small number that were left, of course, there are brethren there that speak and want to speak to other ecclesias because they're invited. So the ecclesia seemed that on a Sunday they were really struggling for numbers. Anyway, we decided to join last August, so that took the massive number of 18 up to 20. Bradford, about 100 years ago, we think, well, less than 100 years ago, sorry, probably in the 1950s, 60s. We think there's about 150 members. There are famous names that came from Bradford, surnames such as Norris. Carter wasn't from Bradford, but very close. Mason, if you've ever heard of Charlie Mason, very well known brethren, and their wives. But anyway, Bradford was a big meeting. The sort of ecclesia, when I went to it in my youth with my dad, I thought it was a scary place because it was so big. So, I got down to 18, we joined it, and it became 20, and then some months later, another couple with their son, who happened to be related to us, joined, so we're up to 23. Bradford itself is, I guess it's about 30-35 minutes away, drive away, miles away from Timsford in Ashton. Just a quick bit of maths in my head. I reckon within 20 miles, I think this is a UK problem. I don't know what you're like in the Americas for this, but within 20-mile radius of where Bradford Ecclesia is, there's about 15 ecclesias. With the total population across those 15 ecclesias of just over, I'm guessing, just over 300. Does that sound sensible to you? That's my point, and we've yet to have that debate. And there's all sorts of reasons why that is the case. So, for example, an ecclesia like Bradford, which used to be 150, an ecclesia like Halifax that used to be 100, say, ecclesia like Huddersfield that used to be 80, which now has gone, ecclesia like Millsbridge that used, when they had the fraternal, got about 800 there. They're all big ecclesias, and they're keeping the light stands open. We can understand that. There are different flavours, there are different types. But I speak at all of those ecclesias, and I speak, I think, at about 65 ecclesias around the UK, and Tim's something similar, and Phil, whatever that is. We're like bees driving round, all passing everybody, polluting the atmosphere, and with our cars as well. It just seems a bit daft to me. But anyway, we joined Bradford, and we love it. It's very friendly. What sort of an ecclesia is it? Well, it was traditionally a very formal meeting, but the nature of the individuals that are in there are desperately trying to cope, and it's just a very friendly ecclesia. But things started to move. Have you ever seen the film? I don't suppose you have, because it's very big. It was very big in the 80s or 90s in England. East is East. Look it up sometime. You probably won't understand the humour. Jim won't, anyway. But I suggest you have a look, Jim, because I know you like humour. But it's brilliant, because it's a film about Bradford, and it's called Bradfordistan. You've heard of Afghanistan and Pakistan and Turkmenistan. Well, the nickname for Bradford is Bradfordistan now. The population of Bradford is about 350,000. Big. It was a huge city because of the woolen industry. So when somebody like an Alfred Norris or a Harry Tennant used to come to America, he'd be wearing a suit from either Huddersfield or Bradford. That's what they might have bought it in other parts of the country, but the best wools were from Huddersfield and Bradford. The population of Bradford, as I say, is 350,000, and now just over a quarter of the population is from Pakistan. And the gospel message doesn't exactly get a very popular reception amongst Islamists. Whereas you might or might not have noticed at Tim's Ecclesia, it was a very posh ecclesia as far as I'm concerned, because it only had wire bars on the windows. Our ecclesia has wire bars on the windows and an 8-foot wire fence around the car park, and we're now discussing whether we should have fake razor wire to go around the top of it. I kid you not. Because 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had the lead stolen from the roof. So that cost us £2,000 or £3,000 to get it fixed, but that's the nature of the area. So again, discussions were going on within the ecclesia, because the one thing we can't solve within Bradford Ecclesia, we've got an excellent hall. It was designed for a big number. We've got an excellent car park around it. We've now got an excellent fence stopping anybody getting in. Isn't that brilliant for preaching the gospel? But the trouble is, it's just in the wrong area. So what should we do? As of today, we've got 31 members. In the last 2 months, maybe 3 months, we've had 8 baptisms. 6 a week last Sunday. and 2 a couple of months before that, all from Iran. Now, some of you, I'm not going to suggest you're racist or anything like that, some of you will be thinking like people in England think, well, why would you want people like that to join your ecclesia? Because surely they're naturally Islamic. Well, the wise amongst you will know that the Iranian name comes from the word Aryan. That's where Iran is titled. That's why it changed its name to Iran. Because they were basically saying, and with the links also with Adolf Hitler, Iran became the eastern base of the Nazi regime in Germany. Iran said, no, we are white. We are not Muslim. We are not Asian. We are not all of these things. We are separate. And they are very different. And they're very closely affiliated to the Russians. But now, of course, Iran is a very extreme Muslim regime, isn't it? And if you're a Christian, even vaguely interested in Christianity of any sort, and living in Iran, you are in danger. I don't know if I've got my facts correct, but I believe there was a sister at Tim's meeting who observed her sister be stoned to death before she left Iran. There are people in our ecclesia who, when they saw the guards, one chap, when he saw the guards walking down the drive, he turned and fled out the back door and he's never been back since. All of the young men that are in our ecclesia, to my understanding, every one of them is married. Most of them have children. But they're interested in the gospel message. Somebody has reported them and they're in extreme danger. You may or may not be interested in cars. Anybody interested in cars? Put your hand up if you're interested in cars. Ever heard of an Aston Martin DB4? James Bond car, 1960 something? Apparently one of the brethren in our ecclesia, I've only just found this out, back home, he has an Aston Martin DB4, which if it's in America or in England for sale and in immaculate condition, it's worth about £1.5 million. So we're trying to work out a way, I might nominate Tim or Phil to go over actually, but we're trying to work out a way of getting an Aston Martin DB4 back from Tehran with their permission, so we can sell it to a dealer to do it up. The only relevance why I'm mentioning the Aston Martin DB4, we're not really bothered about the Aston Martin DB4, even though I am. They've given up everything. The people who've come over, the majority of them, are extremely highly educated. Extremely highly educated. Mikhail, who joined our ecclesia about 5 or 6 years ago, I said to him, because I like a joke, when he was translating for me at the Ecclesial Hall a few weeks back, I said to him, Mikhail, any chance you could translate this to me into the original Hebrew? He says, no, but I can do Greek if you like. So he can speak Farsi, English, and Greek. Another of them said, I'd like to translate for you one day. I said, oh, you'll never keep up with me with my accent. Oh, I will, he said. I said, well, what did you do back in 10? He says, I was professor of English and French. They're highly educated people. And they pick up the gospel. Interviewing 6 new Iranians a week last Sunday, not to suggest we were dubious, but we wanted to make sure they really knew what they were talking about. So 3 of us, unusually, because we all wanted to be involved, interviewing one person at a time. And we were all amazed at their stories. The relevance of that being Bradfordistan, unfortunately, the Iranians don't feel comfortable living in Bradford because they've fled Islam and they're now living in arguably the biggest Islamic city in the United Kingdom. The 2 biggest, I think I'm right in saying, the 2 biggest cities for Islam in the United Kingdom are Leicester and Bradford. But Bradford, you know how these countries have sects. The people from Bradford, the Pakistanis who live in Bradford, are from the very poorest sects, whereas Leicester and Leicestershire are higher up the ladder. So we get the worst end of that, really. That was a photograph taken in December last year. And if I said just by looking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them aren't even members. So that was our ecclesia last year. This person here at the front, which button do I press? The red one. This lady here, she's not Iranian. She's Romanian. She just happened to walk in. So I don't know what we're doing right, but she felt comfortable. There's one of our Iranians, the brother there from Leeds. Now, what's going on at the moment in West Yorkshire and in other parts of the United Kingdom? Every Tuesday at Bradford Ecclesia, Bible study takes place during the day. And I don't know if he's on that, maybe he'll be on it in a bit, but a friend of ours, who's younger than myself, was diagnosed with Parkinson's and had to retire about 2 months ago, and was very worried about his future and what's he going to do to fill his time. Well, he's now very busy because he's doing too much in teaching and helping people and helping with transport, getting them to Bradford Ecclesia for lessons. That was about 3 weeks ago at one of our services. That is the brother who we're very fond of from Halifax Ecclesia, and this here is Sister Atusa. I'm not making a particularly political point. We don't have sisters speaking at our ecclesia, but none of us brethren can speak Farsi, can you? She is delightful. She was baptized about 4 months ago, I think, was it? Look, I think so. That's an example of our ecclesia. Now, look how full it was. 11 months ago, they were thinking about closing. There are thousands of Iranians coming to the United Kingdom. Thousands. I don't know the exact number. Absolutely thousands of them. And they're no trouble at all. They're getting to us in all sorts of difficult ways, under lorries. Atusa and her husband were separated in France for 3 months, and they each thought the other had been murdered. We've asked the question, why are you so keen to come to England? Because the news and the newspapers will say, well, they only want to come to England because they want free benefits. I believe the benefits that they get at the United Kingdom are no different to the rest of Europe, because we're in, at the moment, something called the European Union. The reason why they want to come to the United Kingdom is, if they settle in France or Germany or Spain or whatever, fine. But they're not allowed to apply for their wives or family to join them for a minimum of 2 further years. If they come to England or United Kingdom, they can apply for their wives to join them after 3 months of being established in our place. Any questions? So, it's been a big challenge. We wondered about changing ecclesias and having a fresh challenge, and I think we got more than we bargained for. Hopefully we can play our part. The ecclesia prayed and prayed, apparently, before we joined, that the ecclesia wouldn't close and they'll find a way of becoming valuable and not having to join other ecclesias. And all of a sudden, 8 baptisms in less than a year. Fantastic. It does put pressures on the ecclesia, and we're now going to discuss, not now, when we get back, we've got to discuss, what about the young people within our ecclesia? What about the people who don't speak Farsi, who are sitting listening at the moment to translations, and the young people who've not been baptized particularly? How are we helping their needs? Because it can be a bit wearing. So we're going to work on that. But the Iranians are very helpful, and they will understand, and they'll play their part in it too. You'd be unsurprised to know that every Sunday when all the catering's done, I don't really do much in terms of washing up. But I wouldn't be allowed to. Hang on a minute, I just finished this point. I'll admit into a fault. She's never heard it before. I don't really do much washing up, but now that the Iranians have joined us, I'm not allowed to. Because they force everybody out of the kitchen and they do the work. They're wonderful people. The Iranian brethren particularly speak English, and how many only speak Farsi. I don't know the exact answer to that, but of the 8 members we've got, 9 actually, Iranians, including the one that's been here for quite a while. 3 are very, very good at English and obviously Farsi. And I would say 1 or 2 of the others are a bit pidgin English. Well, put it this way. The one that I interviewed didn't have a translator. So we were just careful. We had one with us, and he was there just in case it was needed. So his pidgin English was enough for us to work out what he was saying. It's working, we're doing it a bit differently in different ways at different times. Some of our services at the moment, and it's all up in the air to be considered because this has all happened very quickly. Some of our services, like the picture I showed you before, are instant translation. So you speak 3 or 4 sentences and whoever the translator is will then say it in Farsi. We're also considering an option. There's another ecclesia not too far from Tim's where they have plenty of Iranians there too, and they're broadcasting a service in Farsi. And what we're considering doing is for the public lecture, continuing with our English spoken lectures without a translator and allowing them to listen in. That's one option. Another option, we have a facility for them to be in a separate room. We speak as per normal in English, and they get an instant translation. That's to do with technology, which is beyond me, but that's possible. So we're trying probably to juggle and use different sources because we want them part of the service, but also we don't want to spoil it, if you know what I mean, for everybody else. The question was, putting it simply, what are ecclesias and what is our ecclesia doing to make contact with these people as they're coming into the UK? Well, there is a brother who's renowned for this in the United Kingdom, Brother Stephen Cox. I don't understand his background really, but he's an expert in these things. He seems to know whoever's coming in the country and where they are. There's almost a little bit of competition from the churches. The churches are also wanting these people in. We are finding that they are coming to us because what they're getting from us is very different to what they get from other churches. These are intelligent people, and if you gave them a 3-hour lecture, they would not complain. We don't do them, by the way, but if you did, they wouldn't complain. They want information, and they take it all on board. And they do find, when they go to certain other churches, that they're offered baptism, or the equivalent of, within about a week of being there. We say, no, we want you to learn, and we take them through a procedure, which they seem to be happy with. But yes, the people that come in are contacted via the Home Office, I believe, through Stephen Cox and some other people. Do you know the other?
So there's also an ecclesia at Liverpool. So there are a number of cities which seem to be hubs where the Iranians are sent and then they're distributed throughout the UK. Now in Liverpool, the ecclesia has been very active. So they are an ecclesia of about 10 UK members with about 60 Iranian members. So that ecclesia actually have been going around dropping off medical kits and wash bags to the Iranian sort of centres. So they've made contact with an awful lot, and then as those Iranians are redistributed around the UK, that ecclesia will say, here is the contact for your nearest ecclesia where you're going to be sent. So that's been really effective.
Yes, there is, but most of these people, most of these Iranians, it seems to me, and I think I'm right here, don't know each other until they get over. They make friends when they get into a group, and then they will obviously say, well, you want to taste Karen's chili on a Sunday. I don't know what they say. And they might go along and suddenly the huge bowl of chili that she's made the following week needs to be an even bigger one. So they obviously do spread the word, and they obviously, hopefully they like us. But yeah, the word is being spread in that context. And Liverpool was the first one that I knew of. One of the connections is, it's interesting that Tim's ecclesia has some Iranians, and our ecclesia has Iranians. What's the difference? What's the connection? They're both. Whereas his ecclesia was, what did you say, rough? The area, rough. And there was also poor. Bradford's rough and poor. They're placed in areas where the housing is cheapest. They're not placed in Windsor or Edinburgh because the rent will be far too expensive for the state. They're given approximately, is it £15 a week to live on? It's ridiculously low. They can't afford the transport. So they either walk to ecclesias, or we pick them up, or we pay for their transport. They put themselves through, there's lots of kids now wanting to come in, so I know what that means to me. Okay, so any final questions? Yeah.
They're really interested. So we've had Bible classes on Persia and Syria. They really buy into it because the biblical background is their history. So it's their national history. They love it. Yeah, and they keep trying to put us right on various things, but yeah, they love it.
like Ezekiel almost as much as Esther. It's interesting, talking about it goes down a lot better than speaking to Russians in Russia. Because I've often been a few times to Russia, to the Bible schools there, and they're quite defensive about what the traditional Christadelphian might say about their country. Our country would never do that. Some of them say that, and some of them would also say, yeah, I can see why you think that. So, but they're still listening. Okay, I think we ought to finish now because the children are outside. Thank you very much.